So now I have my photograph of my Hershey Kiss, and I actually want to take a minute and just look at it blurry. So I have my contour drawing finished, and I want to start to figure out where to add my shading. And blurring the photograph is going to help me figure that out. I don't need to actually blur the photograph the way that I'm doing here to show you. You can simply look at your photograph or the object sitting on the table in front of you and squint your eyes. When you do that, you're going to start to see the contrast of the dark versus the light, and some of those middle values are going to fade away. It makes it easier to figure out where I want to do my shading. So I want to do some shading in that area between the Hershey Kiss and the foil. I want to shade underneath where the cast shadow is, and little areas along the foil, and definitely that tab in the back. So now, if I'm looking to start adding my values, I'm going to pick the darkest areas to start with. So I'm going to start off with a B pencil. It could be a 2B or a 6B, anything that's going to be soft, easy to shade, but still leave room to go to that ebony pencil later. I can still push those edges and really dark values later if I feel like I need just that extra little nudge into 100% black with the pencil. So right now I'm just zooming in, and you can see that I'm doing the shadow that's along the edge of the Hershey Kiss, and now I'm doing the cast shadow underneath the foil. I'm going to speed this up for a moment. So now I'm starting to add in some of the other small dark areas around. I'm working between my B pencil and my ebony pencil, and if I feel like I need to smooth something out, I'm going to grab an H pencil and go over the top and kind of push those areas in. What I'm working on now is the cast shadow from the paper tab. It's actually on the table behind the Hershey Kiss. So I had a little bit of an interruption, and since then I have added some values and shading onto the foil around the Hershey Kiss. The way I approach doing this is I look for the highlights first, and I want to mark where they are on the foil by kind of outlining them. You can see my cursor moving on the right side, kind of pointing out where the highlights are and how I've avoided those areas on the foil itself. And sometimes I will very, very lightly put a line around those. My lines are a little bit dark, but I want you to be able to see them. I used an HB pencil, and I'm going to just add a couple more. I'm noticing that there's also some areas that perhaps I overshaded a little bit, and I should be able to outline them to keep them pure white, but I can't really do that. So I'm going to start drawing with my eraser. So I've taken a brand new Magic Rub eraser and cut it into slices. Some of the slices are thinner or thicker than others, and I am drawing by erasing the graphite that's there and trying to capture back those highlights. I'm noticing on the left there's areas that should be pure bright white. I'm having trouble with that little skinny eraser, so this is a slightly thicker one, but it does seem to just kind of drag the graphite around and not erase it as cleanly as I'd like, so I end up wiping the eraser on other areas and coming back to it multiple times to try to make it pure white paper where my highlights are. Now I'm working on adding the dark values back in where they belong. I had to give up on getting back my pure white paper as I don't seem to be able to erase it quite clean enough. It's always better to just leave that pure white paper and know that you can go back in with the darker values. So really protect those by showing yourself where they are in your drawing and not just kind of estimating them. Now I'm adding in more low and middle values, trying to find those shadows on the foil, and I will be switching over to my B pencils to emphasize those darks. So here I have my 4B pencil, and I'm finding just little dark areas, and I don't have to press hard on the paper at all with this pencil. It is just naturally darker than the HB pencil. I'm continuing to work around now with both my B pencils, HB pencils. I can use my regular H pencils like 2H or 4H to try to smooth things out. And I have this fancy little eraser that I can kind of draw some highlights in there with. This one works much better than a cut-up eraser, but it is obviously a specialty tool. It's time to shade the chocolate. So if you look at the actual value of the chocolate compared to the darkest shadows around it, it is much lighter. So if you were looking at, let's say, a value scale, the chocolate might be all the way down to the middle values. It could even have highlights that are light like a 3. So the black shadows would be a 10. The white glaring highlights would be a 1 or a 0. And the chocolate is a range of mostly a 3 to a 6 on that value scale. So I'm trying to just mark in those light areas and a little bit of the darker areas again, maybe only as dark as a 6. The areas behind it are the 80s, 90s, and 100s, or 8, 9s, and 10s. So I'm using a dark B pencil, and we'll even switch over a little bit to an ebony pencil to kind of separate the chocolate from the dark shadows behind it. Now I'm going to start jumping around to different areas, switching pencils as I see fit for the value, and continue adding values. Even on the letters on the piece of paper, I'm not trying to outline the letters. I'm not trying to draw the letters. I'm just looking at where there are darker areas of blue, and I can see that there is a highlight where the paper is creased and the light is bouncing off of it. So I'm trying to skip those areas as I'm shading. I want the chocolate to really stand out as being a very different texture than the foil, so I'm going to use a blending stump and create the highlights and shadows by smudging around the shadows in a really controlled way. But I'm making sure to look at the Hershey Kiss and see where I see lights and shadows kind of going from the top down to the bottom. The highlights don't wrap around, they go more vertically, but with a little bit of an arch. Okay, it's time to flow between all of these different pencils back and forth, from paper to foil to chocolate, and finish this up. To finish things up, I like to really define what's overlapping what and push the edges. And by push the edges, I mean darkening in where one object overlaps another. So I can see the cast shadow more distinctly. I can separate the foil from the chocolate or the paper from the chocolate. But I want to be careful not to outline that. When I'm all done, I'm going to go in and shade the background to separate the table, or in this case, the paper line, from the area behind it, and really anchor the object onto the table and separate a background space so it doesn't look like things are just floating. To finish things up, I am going to work on smudging a little bit. I smudge the background. I'm actually even using the tortillon stump to pick up graphite in dark areas and draw with it in slightly lighter areas. And we're done.